Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. Let's talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy. It starts off on the bridge of the Protostar, and we see that Janeway the hologram, has come to the conclusion that the crew are all cadets because they're not in uniform. And she explains that she's only there to help them on their way back to Federation space and to maintain lower level functions, as well as that the Federation is in the Beta Quadrant as well as the Alpha Quadrant, which I either didn't know or forgot. And she shows the crew all kinds of images of Federation history. And I think Spock was in there. We can't be 100% sure, but there's a brief second where there's an image of a Vulcan giving the Vulcan salute to an Andorian. And it seems like maybe they sort of took a moment from the animated series and recreated that moment for the holographic history. You can decide for yourself. The next thing that happens is that Dahl declares himself captain and says that he doesn't want to go to Federation space because they're just another authority and probably won't take kindly to a bunch of fugitives showing up in their ship. And instead of heading toward Federation space, he picks a random destination against Janeway's warnings. Gwyn gets tossed in the brig, saying her father will come for her. Meanwhile, speaking of her father, the diviner, he's very upset and determined to get the Protostar back. Back on the Protostar, the engineer is very pleased to learn that replicators give free food. Rock brings some food to Gwyn in the brig and asks her why she didn't stop her father from mistreating them. And she says that he told her they were all criminals. So I guess she figured it was justifiable, the way they were being treated. Interesting fact came up in this episode. Apparently the Protostar has dual warp cores. Not really sure how that works. The engineer said something about it could get to warp 9 on just one. So does that mean that if they engaged both, they could go beyond that? I don't really know, but they made a point of mentioning this. So that was kind of interesting. So next, the ship comes out of warp at their destination, and it turns out that it's a white dwarf that's caught them in its gravity well. And Dahl, at this point, orders all power to the impulse engines because Janeway tells him that it wouldn't be advisable to engage the warp engines. And apparently, this caused the brig force field that was keeping Gwyn locked up to drop, which seems unlikely to me. I think if you had a general input into a starship's computer that said divert all power to, it would know not to include critical systems like keeping prisoners in the brig and life support, which of course did not go out. So somebody somewhere knew that you don't turn off everything when an order like that comes through. So why the brig shields went down, other than it's the plot, I don't know. Of course, I can't imagine that impulse engines are, would be enough to escape a white dwarf star. And in fact, they turn out not to be. And Dahl starts jettisoning all non-essential cargo and objects, which seems to include escape pods, which, again, I wouldn't think was likely, although in that situation, it's not like anybody's going to use them. They would get stuck as well. So you may as well kick them out and then resupply when you get out of there. I guess, I don't know, I suppose that makes sense. But here's another thing that doesn't make sense. It turns out that diverting all power also caused the shields to drop, which again seems unlikely because it didn't turn off life support. So why would it turn off the shields? Like, obviously the computer knows that all power doesn't mean all power. It's like, what, you know what I mean? You'd think the shields would not get dropped. Anyway, they do, and of course the ship starts getting pummeled by debris that's also flying towards the white dwarf because it's caught in its gravity well. Gwyn, meanwhile, who's escaped, starts building a shuttlecraft of her own with the ship's vehicle replicator. Now, this, of course, is something new that we've not seen on Star Trek before, but it's pretty cool if you think about it. You can now just build a shuttlecraft in your own cargo bay or shuttle launch bay with the 24th century version of a 3D printer, I guess, or replicator technology, which really, I guess, is kind of like 3D printing. But that's pretty cool that they could do that. So she starts doing that, but Rock stops her and apprehends her. But in the process, gravity gets disabled somehow. They hit the wrong button or something, so they all start floating. At this point, Dahl reluctantly activates Janeway for help. He was trying to do it all on his own, but he turned out not to be able to. And she guides them to restoring gravity and then to riding the shock wave of the gravity well as a means of propelling themselves free, which I find myself dubious of. In other words, they turned the ship towards the thing and used the shock wave to propel them free of the gravity well. Shock waves, to my understanding, come from explosive events or events that release energy, not events that suck up energy in objects, because a singularity is going to suck light in because black holes do. So if a collapsing white dwarf would be a singularity, it'd be like a black hole forming anyway, and so it would suck in energy, not expel it. I don't know. I'm not a physicist, or an astrophysicist, but that just seemed weird to me that there would be a shock wave from a collapsing white dwarf. I don't know. I didn't buy that, but who knows? After this, we see that Diviner is launching his own ship in order to pursue the protostar, and it's enormous. It's a massive thing. And he also, of course, is trying to rescue Gwyn when he does this. And that was good. It was good to hear him say, my daughter, I'm coming for you, or my progeny, I'm coming for you. Because I'd hate to think he was just all about the ship and not about his own daughter. But apparently he's interested in rescuing her as well. The question I had, though, was if he's got this massive ship, what does he need a Federation starship for? What does Diviner need with the starship? No, I don't really get that. He hasn't made that clear. If he didn't have a powerful spacefaring vehicle of his own, then I'd be like, okay, I know why he wants the starship. But he does have one, and it's huge. So I don't know what that's about, but maybe we'll see as the show goes on. I like this episode quite a bit, except for the questions I had about, well, why would that go off when you divert all power? Because the computer would know that you need that, just like it knows you need life support, and didn't turn that off. But anyway, that stuff aside, and the stuff about the shockwave aside, this was yet again a good episode. These characters continue to be great, and Mulgrew is unsurprisingly excellent, of course, as Janeway, as is John Noble, by the way, as the Diviner. I neglected to mention him in my review of the season premiere, but he plays the Diviner, and he's excellent, as always. He's just fantastic in this. And so I really enjoy him, and I enjoy her, and these characters are, I think, well written and well acted. Rock and Zero, the Medusan character, especially, I think, are great. And, Dahl is good. The engineer is good. Gwyn is also very good. I just think all around the writing of these characters is great, and the acting is great. There's a scene where, like I said, they discover that there's no charge for food from the replicator. And the engineer basically tells Rock, you can get whatever you want. And she said, well, the only food I've ever eaten is the gruel that they served us in the mine. So I'm just going to order that. She doesn't know anything else. She doesn't have a favorite food, beyond that. The only food she's ever eaten. So I thought that was a strong moment, that gives us insight into this character and just sort of what her story is, or what her baggage is. And you can tell, of course, that she's very young from her voice and from the way she sees things and understands things. And there was, of course, a sadness in her voice when she said, that all she'd ever had was the food in the mine, because she knew that made her different from other people who'd had a life outside the mine before they were taken there. And so I just think it demonstrates that the writers are good at their job, and in character building. And I think it makes the character very sympathetic, because you know that's just somebody you feel for, right? That's lived that way, especially if they're still young and they've only known life in captivity. And I also think it sets her up for a ton of growth. And I think it's going to be great to watch the character grow over the season, and however far the show goes after this first season. So I'm looking forward to the future episodes. I think another character you talk about growth, I think that's going to come around is Gwyn. I think Gwyn is going to very soon decide to join permanently the crew of the Protostar, and to sort of throw her lot in with theirs. I think she's going to come out against her dad, and I think that's going to be a cool turn of events as well. So I'm looking forward to that. But great episode, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And I'll be back with a review of that when it comes out. Until then, my friends, I wish you peace and long life.